Canada is no longer confused, no longer naive, and no longer pretending that diplomatic politeness can contain what is unfolding, because what Donald Trump has said and done around Venezuela has sent shockwaves not just through Ottawa, but through every allied capital and every serious national security institution that still believes the post-war international order matters. And this is not simply about one country in Latin America or one volatile press conference, but about something far more dangerous, a sitting U.S. president openly normalizing domination, coercion, and territorial assertion as legitimate tools of state power, forcing Canada to confront a new and chilling reality that if Trump is willing to push this far in one place, he is capable of pushing this far everywhere, which is why Canada is no longer laughing off his words as bluster or dismissing them as political theater, but is instead preparing, quietly and seriously, to defend itself if required, especially after Trump escalated U.S. action against Venezuela by seizing its president and declaring that Washington would take Venezuela's affairs into its own hands, framing American involvement not as diplomacy or limited pressure, but as a direct assertion of U.S. dominance over the Western Hemisphere. And when he later addressed the world, he did not speak of international law, multilateral consensus, or democratic transition, but instead used the language of power, invoking doctrines of supremacy, talking about control, influence, and strategic entitlement, and making it clear that the United States would no longer accept limits on how it asserts itself within what it considers its sphere. A moment that for Canadian officials was the true turning point, because what mattered was not Venezuela itself, but the logic behind Trump's actions, a logic that openly treats borders, sovereignty, and consent as secondary to strength and rules as optional when power is sufficient, is reducing nations to assets rather than equals, which from Ottawa's perspective is not abstract geopolitics, but an existential warning, since Canada is a resource-rich democracy sharing the longest undefended border on Earth with the United States. And when a U.S. president begins normalizing expansionist language and unilateral action abroad, Canada knows it is no longer merely watching foreign policy, but witnessing precedent being set, a realization that has shattered decades of assumptions about restraint, predictability, and respect for sovereignty, and marked the moment Canada began to reassess everything.
All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere.
For decades, much of Latin America felt geopolitically distant to Canadians, important, complex, and worthy of attention, but not something that directly threatened Canada's own security or sovereignty. That illusion is now gone. Canada is not alarmed merely because of Venezuela. It is alarmed because of the framework Donald Trump is using to justify his actions, a framework rooted in doctrines of dominance, in the language of spheres of control, and in the idea that sovereignty is conditional rather than absolute. To Canadian policymakers, this is not rhetorical flair or political theater. It is historical déjà vu. Canada knows what happens when powerful states begin redefining borders, consent, and legitimacy on their own terms. It always starts with language, it escalates through precedent, and it ends with normalization. From Ottawa's perspective, Venezuela does not look like an isolated crisis. It looks like a testing ground, a place where Trump can measure how much resistance exists and how quickly the world will push back. That is why Canada is now serious in a way it has not been before. For years, talk of Canada becoming the 51st state was treated as trolling or headline bait, something to be laughed off as provocation. But that assumption no longer exists. Canadian security analysts now read Trump's words the same way they read military exercises, economic threats, or coercive diplomacy, as signals of intent. When a leader repeatedly names countries he believes should be absorbed, dominated, or controlled, Canada assumes those statements are deliberate, not accidental. And that is why Canada's response is not panic, but anger. Because Canadians understand that sovereignty is rarely lost in one dramatic stroke. It erodes slowly through normalization, intimidation, and silence, and Canada has decided it will not be silent. Canada has heard the justifications before. Talk of liberation, talk of restoring order, talk of protecting people. But Canadian officials are listening not only to what Trump says, but to what he does not say. There is no sustained respect for democratic agency, no consistent emphasis on international legitimacy, no patience for multilateral process. Instead, the rhetoric keeps circling back to resources, leverage, and control, and from Canada's vantage point, this looks less like a principled stand and more like transactional power politics, the kind that treats nations as assets and populations as obstacles. History shows that when power is exercised this way, it does not stop after one success. It expands, and that is why Venezuela matters so deeply to Canada, not because of geography, but because of precedent. Canada's response has not been theatrical. There are no viral threats, no chest-thumping speeches, no performative outrage. Instead, there is preparation, quiet coordination with European partners, serious reassessment of military dependencies, and careful study of modern conflicts, especially Ukraine, where asymmetric warfare, drones, civilian resilience, and rapid mobilization have rewritten the rules of power. Canada is now reviewing assumptions that once felt permanent, about allies, about supply chains, about deterrence. This is not fear, it is realism. Canada is not trying to provoke Trump. Canada is making sure it is never caught unprepared by him, and that distinction is critical. Canada understands something Trump openly rejects. Power exercised alone is power that eventually collapses. While Trump mocks alliances and dismisses international institutions, Canada is reinforcing them, strengthening ties with Europe, deepening NATO cooperation, and coordinating closely with democratic partners who still believe that rules matter. Canada is not betting on intimidation. Canada is betting on legitimacy, because history shows that countries that operate outside the international system burn through influence quickly, while those embedded within it endure, and Canada intends to endure.
It's not going to happen, Don. You have no idea what you've unleashed here. You have no idea of the extent of opposition because you've surrounded yourself with criminal. And Donald, quite frankly, you are a criminal yourself. You're a narcissist. You're a convicted criminal. If you hadn't lived off Russian dark money for all these years, you would have been bankrupt long ago, and you will be bankrupt again, Donald, because you are driving your country into the ground and making it a pariah on the international stage. As for Canada, we will do what we've got to do. We will continue to build our alliances. We will continue to focus our economy away from the gangster economy so that we are ready. Whatever happens next, Donald, Canadians will not let you cross the border. Not now, not ever. We will always be true north, strong, and free.
It is not going to happen. Don, you have no idea what you have set in motion. You have no idea how much resistance you have awakened by the way you speak, the way you govern, and the way you surround yourself with figures whose credibility and integrity are constantly under question. Your style of leadership, driven by ego, confrontation, and disregard for norms, has pushed not only America's critics, but even its closest allies into a state of alarm. You are turning your own country into something it has not been for generations, a source of instability, suspicion, and international unease. And as for Canada, we will do what we must. We will continue to build our alliances. We will continue to reorient our economy away from any system that rewards coercion, corruption, and brute force. We will make ourselves ready for whatever comes next, because Canadians will not allow their future to be dictated by threats, intimidation, or reckless ambition. Not now, not ever. We will always be true, north, strong, and free. Canada's message to Donald Trump is clear, even when delivered calmly. Canada will not be absorbed. Canada will not be bullied. Canada will not quietly accept any threat to its sovereignty. The era of assuming good faith is over. Canada now takes Trump at his word, and that is exactly why Canada is ready to defend itself, ready to stand with its allies, ready to say no quietly, firmly, and permanently. Canada is not reacting to headlines. Canada is reacting to history. History teaches that when leaders begin to speak in the language of domination, the nations that survive are the ones that prepare early, not the ones that dismiss the warning signs. Canada believes Donald Trump when he shows the world who he is, and that belief is why Canada is prepared. This is Canada Today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.